Okay, so we've been looking at ensuring that how AI can be more inclusive. We've just looked at making sure that AI is being used for the greater good. But the fact of the matter is, if we're using AI, we're consuming more resources than before we were using AI. And yet that's despite the fact that we all agree that we need to focus and do more to protect our planet and for our environment. AI is taking us away from our environmental goals, but here now to keep sustainability and the environment objectives clearly in our sights. Please welcome the Global Head of Sustainability at Sopra Steria, Axel Lemaire, and founder of BetterTech, James Martin. Welcome.
Hello, Kristen.
Hello to you both. Axel, welcome back to Change Now.
Thank you.
James,
hello, everyone.
Welcome to our blindingly bright stage
Thank
here.
you. It's bright, isn't it?
Axel Lemaire, Sopra Steria, you're in the top 5 actors in this space in Europe. You've got over 51,000 collaborators in 30 different countries, so clearly have a role in shaping tech in Europe. James Martin, founder at BetterTech, a leading expert on technology's impact and how to reduce it. James, you've become a go-to reference for environmental data. You keep a critical eye on what people are reporting, but also what they're not reporting, which is just as important in this. So our session title is Reducing AI's Environmental Footprint. Okay, James, can you start off by giving us some facts? What is our footprint data? Facts, please.
There isn't an easy answer to that question. It's Sam Altman, who is the CEO of OpenAI. He tweeted recently, I really enjoyed this tweet. He said, anti-AI people like to make shit up about the impact of AI. Well, Sam, if you told us a bit more about the actual impact of your AI, we wouldn't have to make shit up. I'm not anti-AI either, but my point is, if I don't know how many of you created some of those legally doubtful Ghibli images with ChatGPT recently, or those starter packs, just based on the latest estimations we've got, making one of those images uses enough energy to charge half a smartphone, at least half a smartphone. So if you put all that together, now I don't want to go too far with that sort of example because it depends a lot on the data center, where you're doing it, etc. But what we are totally sure of is the bigger trends, which are that people are using AI so much right now that data center energy consumption is going to at least double, or if not triple, by the end of this decade. That's one. And the water that these data centers consume is going to triple, or if not quadruple, by the end of the year. So you say that to people that like Sam Altman, and they would say, it's okay, we've got it under control, it's going to become more efficient, we're going to use less energy and time. Well, actually, if you look at the next generation of NVIDIA GPUs that are allowing all this AI, generative AI to happen, the 2027 generation of NVIDIA GPUs will use 5 times more energy per rack than the current generation. So we're not on a good path, and we're even on such a bad path that in America, where most of these data centers are, it's around a third to a quarter of coal energy stations, which were going to be shut down, are now being kept going so that we can keep making Ghibli and starter pack images. Essentially, this is what's happening right now.
Okay, so thank you for setting the scene for us there, Axel. Across to you. We've heard a little bit about the impact. Clearly, we're not going in the right direction. But just out there with regards to the title of this session, what's the most impactful thing then that we can do to reduce our AI footprint?
Well, I'll complete what you've just said about Sam. So Sam, CEO of OpenAI, if you're listening to us, please give us the figures. And I think the most impactful thing we could start with is measuring, because the reality is we can share some facts and figures, but we do not have access to the environmental information from the cloud providers. When they train the large models that then they put on their platform that being used by developers, we do not have the carbon impact of that training. To the extent that we altogether do not realize now the reality of what's behind AI in terms of environmental impact. Let me share some information that will help you realize that reality. The electricity consumption on an annual basis of data centers was on average 200 terawatt per hour between 2010 and 2020. And it didn't grow, it didn't increase that much. In the last 3 years, it reached 415 terawatt per hour. That's according to the first and latest report from the International Energy Agency dedicated to AI, right? And until by 2030, that figure will not be multiplied by 2, it will be multiplied by 4. And that's for the electricity consumption only. But look at this smartphone. It's using more than 50 different electronic components. And in the digital industry value chain, all in all, almost all of the elements that have been identified in the periodic charter, so that's 118, are part of the value chain, right? And we estimate that by 2030 again, the volume of electronic wastes related to electronic chips, so the GPUs, right, that are used to train and to stock models, will be multiplied by, can you guess? 1,000. Okay, so this is the reality, Sam. So I'm not anti-AI either. 10 years ago, I was a government minister in France in charge of digital affairs, right? We did pass regulation on open science, on open data, on open source, in order to create the conditions to feed AI, to make sure that it would be positively impactful. Okay, so maybe 10 years ago, during the Paris Agreement, we didn't know what we're talking about now. But 10 years later, honestly, Sam, we have no excuse.
Okay, so that's quite chilling, but I love the amount of data and facts you're both bringing in to really make this very real. AI is not going away. Our footprint definitely hasn't gone away. In fact, the opposite, it's getting bigger. And our experts are warning us of Jevons paradox, which is that, in fact, any efficiency gains that we may be making are being eaten up because there's an increased demand. The Ghibli images and other, for example, out there. So I'm going to come at you now both and ask how we're going to mitigate this and then maybe compensate it as well. Okay, so to mitigate, to start off with, Axel, R&D, ways to find ways in which we can mitigate this risk in some way, shape or form. What can we do?
There are promising research being done at the moment to stock data in different ways. So, for example, using NDA or stocking it on a kind of new glass material, right? But this is R&D, so it's not happening now, whereas what we're talking about is really happening now, and we see the very rapid spread of the use of ChatGPT, for example. I think nowadays 800 million people are using it, so that's a fifth of the world population with a very, very rapid adoption, right? Mm-hmm. So we have no time. So we need, and Antoine Petit was here, we need to massively invest in R&D. But for the moment, what can we do? Well, first, choose the right data centers in the way they're being built and the way they stock the data, and choose their location. Because of course, if you look at the difference between France and Germany, if the data center is located in France and in Germany because of their energy sources, it's 7 times more polluting and more energy emissive than in France.
And this is actually just, sorry, I'm going to interrupt you because I want to get through a lot. I've got 2 brilliant minds on stage here. But research, definitely for the longer term, but there are things we need to be careful about right here and now. Where we do things, the data centers that we use. James, I know, has a list of things in here as well. So I'm going to ping pong across between you both, okay? We're going to do ping pong on this. What can we do to mitigate our risks right here and right now, James, also?
You need to be aware of what you call the Jevons paradox. It's also called the rebound effect. These are the indirect effects. So what we were talking about, energy, water are direct effects. Indirect effects are, for example, Microsoft has enabled ExxonMobil and Chevron to find more petrol with AI. This means that they those 2 projects alone will generate 3 to 4 times more emissions than Microsoft itself. So it's not just indirect emissions, it's enabled emissions. What can you do at your level? Well, another way you're being pushed into generating these rebound effects is when in Microsoft Office or in WhatsApp, when it says, would you like to write this message with AI? Well, one of the best things you can do is just go, no, write it yourself, because that's not necessary impact. Then the other way to mitigate is, so if you've established, do I really need AI? Well, if you do, maybe you can use a kind of AI, like symbolic AI, which can use thousands of times less emissions to do the same thing. You can also do things like try and use smaller models. So the data center example is very good, because if you're using a European cloud provider whose data centers in Europe, they're, like Axel was saying, because of the better energy mix, you'll be generating less emissions than in the States or even in Germany, so that's great. But the real problem with AI, and with what I was hinting at before, is that we're in this sort of bigger is better race. It was mentioned on the previous panel. The next models, the next processes, everything has to be bigger, 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 better. Stargate is a 500 billion project, which is just going to be ridiculously huge. The fact is that smaller models can do just as good a job as bigger models. So companies like Soprasteria need to be encouraging their clients to be using less impactful models and not always going for bigger, 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 and bigger, faster, stronger.
So being very conscious about what we're doing today is one way in which we can mitigate. Axel, I interrupted you because I want you now to also talk about something else we can do, something that us Europeans are very good at. Okay, regulation. What role can regulation do and help us in terms of reducing our footprint?
First, let me share my conviction, which is regulation for business is not necessarily a burden. And when it comes to ESG topics, we actually need it. And not only to make sure that private companies work in responsible ways and produce values in responsible way, but also I'm convinced that it is a source for better competitiveness because it's distinctive and it's quality competitiveness, right? The thing is, I'm not sure everyone shares that conviction because the AI Act was passed recently, is being implemented by the private sector at the moment, and the level of lobbying last year was so big that the objective of introducing some regulation on the environmental impact of AI was dropped, which means that Article 95 of that piece of legislation now only refers to voluntary code of conduct. And I've been on both sides. I've worked in the public sector and now work in the private sector. And I can tell you that having a regulatory framework actually helps to set, principles, help developers to understand what their clients can expect. So actually having rules help, and I think need rules on the environmental impact of AI, and that could be a huge differentiator for companies who have activities in Europe compared with other regions of the world.
Fantastic. Yes, so regulation not just for the competitiveness, but also I think for the resilience that we have, our company's resilience, our economic resilience out there as well.
I mean, there are many studies that demonstrate the direct relation between resilience and resilience of operating model, resilience of supply chain and sustainability. When we develop digital technologies in sustainable ways, we actually end up being more efficient and being more resilient. So the idea that small is beautiful actually both helps the planet and the people on one side and helps the competitiveness of companies on the other.
I'm delighted to agree with you so much. It's great. And I want to talk a bit about France, why France is such a great place for developing this newer kind of what we call frugal AI. Not only do we have data center, we have a low rate of carbon in our energy in France, but also we have this thing called, so the regulation is not there yet, but there are guidelines which are developed by the National Standards Authority called AFNOR. It's called the Frugal AI, basically guidelines, référentiel in French, and it says that if you want your model to be considered as frugal, you need to prove that you couldn't solve this problem with another solution than AI. You need to prove that you're using the very best practices to make your model as lean as possible, that it consumes as little energy as possible. And the best bit, the real kicker, is it's great for business too, because if you want to work with the French government, you have to prove that your AI model is frugal. So France is like really leading the way right now. Ça tombe bien. But France is in a lot of ways really setting the standard. And then there's all sorts of innovation coming from also the associative sector. There's a way to measure the impact of your models, which is called ecologits.ai. It's one of many tools, but it's a really good one. It's developed by an association which I'm part of, called Gen AI Impact, and they're really working to push, like we were saying before, for more transparency. We need to be able to measure, or we can't improve.
Okay, well, thank you to you both. I love this panel. I love having two such strong voices giving such solid data, but also pathways forwards to help us continue to both maybe use AI, but significantly reduce through through mitigating, but also compensating and seeing how we can use AI differently. Unfortunately, our time is up. I'd love to keep talking with you for ages, but please make sure you broadcast this information and everything that James and Axel have just shared as widely as possible so that we can make sure we're taking care of AI's environmental footprint. Thank you very much to you both. Thank you very much to our audience. Thank you.